Those were the headlines we were tracking for you this evening. Hello and welcome to Startup Street. I'm Shruti Mishra and joining me is my colleague Mugdha Warrior. Now on to some funding news now. Fresh to Home, a fully integrated online brand in fresh fish and meat e-commerce, has raised over $120 million in Series C round led by Investment Corporation of Dubai, Investor Corp, Ascent Capital, US Government's Development Finance Institution and the Alana Group, with significant follow-on investment from Iron Pillar. To know more about the fundraise and the road ahead, for the venture joining me now is Shan Kadavil, co-founder and CEO of Fresh to Home. Shan, many thanks for joining us on Startup Street. Now, in the last 5 years, you've created a coveted brand for fish and meat commerce. And interestingly, you're also one of the creators of Farmville, a Zynga product. What made you go from desktop farming to working with real farmers? Basically, you know, from farmers to farm fish, what happened?
Shruti, great to be here. And I like the word desktop farming, but it was a lot of hard work. Just to give you a background, I'm a serial entrepreneur, been spending most of my early life in the Valley. And in my last gig, a bunch of us, myself and 7 other co-founders, we were running Zynga in India. And at Zynga, we were creating some of the largest games like Farmville. And at this time, I was buying fish from a company called as Seed to Home that is currently run by my current co-founder, Matthew Joseph. Now, Matthew is a fish exporter with about 30 plus years of experience in fish, and he tried his hand at a e-grocery venture in 2011 called Seed to Home, which is one of its kind and maybe the first in India. And at that point of time, I was buying fish from him. Now, Matthew knew his fish really well, but times were tough, and in the e-commerce DNA was hard. And he ended up having to shut down the venture, and I couldn't get fish. So as a foodie, the only logical option was to quit Zynga and then do this full time. That's how we went in from making games to starting freshtohome.com.
All right, that was a good story from Farmville to Fresh Fish. Now, Fresh to Home was launched in 2015. How has the business evolved over the years? What were the pivots that you had to make?
So business has been very interesting, right? Because when we looked at the business, we saw that the market is humongous, right? It's like a $94 billion market. Yeah. There are no organized players there, right? More than 99.97% of this market is unorganized. But at the same time, we saw that there is a number of hyper-local players, and there's a number of e-grocery players who are all trying to sell sell their products to the consumers. But what we could not see is none of them had the traceability to the source, right? People did not know where the food came from. So that was the unique opportunity that we saw, that we could vertically integrate this marketplace, directly connect the fishermen and farmers. Yeah. So what we ended up doing is we had this great idea called commodities exchange. We now have a US patent for that. And this technology allows the various fishermen in the various coasts of India to directly bid and sell with us. Think about this as the world's largest auctions platform. But instead of auctioning, we're auctioning perishable commodities like fish. Yeah. So this really allowed us, the sellers in the platform, to directly source from over 1,500 fishermen in 125 coasts in India. And also from livestock farmers, right? And that's really where we are able to stand by the brand guarantee of 100% fresh and 0% chemicals, because we know where our food comes from. That is a huge differentiator in the market. It allowed us to go viral, and we became really, really fast, really quickly. And that was a key pivot that we made, which is to go direct to consumer, but also direct to the supplier. Sure. And that's a big, big differentiator in terms of the quality of the product, in terms of our gross margins, in terms of how the business is able to grow. Okay, that's a brand promise. 100% guarantee, zero chemicals. Now, COVID-19 has transformed consumer behavior dramatically as the purchasing has now swiftly moving online. Take me through the traction you saw during the lockdown. Also, take me through the changing consumer patterns you're seeing right now. So COVID has been very unfortunate overall, but especially in our segment, it has been a tremendous tailwind. Because the biggest issues that we've had is to educate Indians that buying from the wet markets, particularly in the most unsanitary conditions, is not really good for your health, right? Because if you look at it, mutton gets hung from morning to evening without any refrigeration in most of the wet markets. But bacterial decomposition starts within 30 minutes. So what COVID did for us is to offer a try before you buy, right? Because now wet markets were no longer accessible or were not safe. So we had that first-time try behavior, and that greatly accelerated consumer behavior. Right? People now started figuring out that it's actually the same. It's much better quality that you get when you buy online, and especially when you buy online from providers like Fresh to Home, we go directly to the fishermen and farmers. Our business grew over 4 times in the last 12 months, and particularly in the lockdown period, over 2.5 times. So this is a tremendous boost for us. We ended up with over 15 lakh orders per month at the end of the COVID lockdown scenario.
Yeah. So tremendous boost for the business and tremendous amount of funding raised. Coming to the fundraise now, $121 million, one of the biggest Series C capital raise in India's consumer tech space. Now, how will this help you really compete with the likes of Licious and Big Basket? Also, how do you plan to utilize these funds?
Listen, when the market is 99.97% is unorganized, we are not really competing with any other players in the market, right? We're really competing with the wet markets. We're trying to change consumer behavior from going to an unorganized way of buying to an organized way of buying. And in this scenario, we are clearly the largest at this time, at 600 crores of revenue annualized on our platform. So essentially, the real shift for us is to figure out how to do more vertical integration. We've done that in fish, we've done that in chicken. Now, the funds are going to be used to understand and add more categories. It is also to add more platform, fishermen and livestock farmers into our platform, and also to expand geographically. We are currently in 10 cities in India. We are soon starting in Calcutta. We are starting in Coimbatore, in Salem, in the tier 2 cities. And internationally, we are expanding to more countries in the GCC. We are today the 5th largest e-grocery player in UAE. And we are now soon going into Saudi Arabia. This is really the use of proceeds from the funding.
Okay. Now, Shan, like you mentioned earlier in the interview, the consumer market size of the fish and meat segment in India in 2019 was $94 billion. Now, there's also a lot of investor interest for business in the fresh food space, and the segment has seen the entry of a lot of new players. Now, how do you plan to retain customers in such a competitive market?
It's a pretty simple, straightforward formula. And that is really what our brand tagline signifies, right? 100% fresh, 0% chemicals. We don't think anybody is there who are able to stand by that claim because we know where our food comes from. And as a consumer in any of the large metros in India, it's very hard to know where your food comes from. So what we do is that if you go down to our website and if you buy our poultry, we give you certification for it. You know that we've tested it for 120 products. We know where exactly our food comes from. That's a unique differentiator that nobody else is able to do that. And hence, we think we have a clear edge in this market.
All right, Shan, many thanks for joining us today on Startup Street, and congratulations on the huge amount of funding that you've raised. Mugdha, over to you.
All right, thanks, Shruti. Well, from the fresh food sector to the digital payment space, which has actually been seeing increasing activity, and I don't just mean in terms of the volume of digital transactions, from the push to interoperable QR by the RBI to global plans for UPI and RuPay. There's a lot happening in this space. Joining us right now is Parveena Rai, the COO of the National Payments Corporation of India. Parveena, welcome on the show. And first, let's talk about that RBI notification from last week on interoperable QR, where they've asked all payment service providers to move to interoperable QR by 2022. How do you see the impact on the payment landscape, especially, how many players will be impacted who currently have proprietary QR code, and will merchants shift to QR codes versus POS machines going forward?
Hi, thank you for having me on this. And I think we are seeing some silver lining to the dark cloud in the pandemic times with very good growth on the digital payments. So people are increasingly using this as a safer mechanism. We are seeing more merchants and more users coming onto the platform on digital payments. You raised a very, very good question on both QR and interoperability. So, the QR standards, it's great for a country to have standards. It makes it much simpler for the entire ecosystem to grow using certain norms that everyone understands. So a merchant will find it much easier to make a choice of the kind of service he wants to provide for his consumer on how to pay. Having too many types of QRs, complicates it. Then he does not know which kind of a payment app or a bank app can actually accept a certain kind of a QR. So what's really good right now is we are seeing a proliferation of about nearly 50 million QRs in the market. So that's absolutely not a small number. in the last year and a half has been a time when the merchant community, especially the small merchants, have really taken to QRs in a very big way. In the pandemic times, with people not really visiting the smaller merchants, that was a bit of an issue that got resolved through some very innovative solutions from our solution providers. But I think we are back to a place where the QR transactions will continue to increase. Now, what is a QR, right? A QR really represents who the merchant is. So when you go to a shop and you scan the QR, immediately it identifies to the payment scheme and to the bank who is the merchant. And that standardization is very positive. However, this, for example, let me take the UPI QR. So every merchant has a UPI ID, and that UPI ID is what is really there in the QR. So we are also really trying to make merchants more aware of what their UPI ID is, so that they are able to make the connection between the QR and the UPI and use this more effectively.
Right. All right. So that's on the UPI QR. Now on UPI transactions, they reached 1.8 billion in September. They've been growing month on month. And in fact, in the first half of October, they seem to have already crossed 1 billion transactions. Do you see, this month closing with over 2 billion transactions, UPI transactions?
I think, the run rate looks very good. If we look at digital payments in India, last year we did about 45 billion payments. And right now we are, first half of the year, as a country, we are close to about 25 billion already. So I think, we are going to do much better this year, irrespective of a slightly more slower economic situation due to the pandemic. And a good part of that is a contribution from the UPI side. So, I mean, we are very hopeful. Different kind of UPI transactions and payments are happening today. In addition to the P2P and P2M, the UPI auto pay, which is really mandate and recurring payments that has been launched. We are expecting that over the coming months to also give this a fillip. And people are becoming more aware of what really UPI is, right? Because there are 100 banks that have banking apps on which UPI payments can be made. There are about 20 payment app providers on, who provide the UPI payment services.
No, absolutely, Parveena. I think UPI definitely has taken off. We have to wait and watch if it crosses the 2 billion mark. Parveena, I want to ask you, is there an increase in failure rate when it comes to UPI transactions? A lot of technical declines by several banks. And how are you at NPCI looking to address this through a dispute resolution process?
So, RBI has come up with the dispute resolution. It's called the ODR, Online Dispute Resolution. And I think this is a real cutting edge standard. And the same kind of experience we've been able to give on payments to the UPI users, a wow experience should be given on the customer service side as well. Even now, every UPI app has a icon and has the functionality for a consumer to raise any issue or any concern they have on a transaction. This is less known feature, so I think there is a focus from our side to create the awareness on this. But today, not all the transactions or not all the issues can be resolved instantaneously. So with the new mechanism that RBI has asked all the payment operators to work on, this is really something that is still work in progress. But we are hoping to create a very frictionless and superior experience for consumers on this.
So when will it be effective, Parveena? When will this online dispute resolution be effective?
In the coming months. Not too long away. In the coming months, this should start effective.
Okay. One last question, Parveena, I have to ask you, RBI is now calling for applications to create a new umbrella entity for payments, which would be actually for profit against, the non-profit that NPCI is. How are you looking at this? Will it affect the powers of NPCI? And will there be any conflict of interest with a lot of banks already, having stake in NPCI here?
No, I think, whatever is coming from the regulatory standpoint, I think, that will happen. And it's always good to be on the edge and have, being on the competitive edge with UPI and RuPay and our products. I think we will continue to do our best there. And I think that's the right way to approach this. Even today, I spoke about 100 banks, 100 plus banks, close to about 150 banks on UPI. The interoperability that this provides, by which a user can use any one of these apps or banks to make a payment to anybody else, any consumer, any merchant. I think that's really the key proposition. And we believe that as long as we continue to focus and work on that proposition, we should be okay there.
Okay, so NPCI should be okay there even if there's another umbrella entity. Parveena, thank you so much for joining us. With that, it's time to slip into a short break. Don't go anywhere, a lot more on the other side.
Welcome back to Startup Street. Now, InVideo, a video creation platform that allows users to create high-quality video for any form of digital media, has raised $15 million in Series A round led by Sequoia Capital India. Now, this round also saw participation from Tiger Global, Hummingbird, RTP Global and Base. Launched in April 2019 by Sanket Shah and Harsh Vakaria, who had first worked together on a startup that created 10-minute video summaries of non-fiction books, InVideo today counts PNG, Dropbox, Reuters, ATT and Network 18 as its users. Now, joining me right now is one of the co-founders and CEO, Sanket Shah. Sanket, many thanks for joining us on Startup Street. Now, talk to me about the product. As I just mentioned, you already had experience working in the domain and spent time building an enterprise-grade video creation suite for newsrooms. What made you take this a step further and build InVideo?
Correct. Thanks for having me. It was simple. In fact, CNBC, we worked with CNBC, and I'm super grateful to Shankar sir, Kanika and Khushbu. We started observing what people were doing, how people were creating videos, and then started laying out a structure to ease that process of video creation. And when we started working with multiple newsrooms across India, we also started getting a lot of inbound inquiries from different agencies, small and medium businesses. And that is when we said that, hey, it's time to go global and launch it for everyone to start using it.
All right, Sanket.
But that was the core premise.
Okay. Now, InVideo also claims to cut the time to create a professional quality video by over 90%. So let me ask you, who is your competitor? Are you looking to be a replacement for popular editing softwares like Apple's First Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere Pro, or other lighter, online editing solutions? Who's your competition?
So if you ask your producers, they will know the issues with those platforms. All the legacy platforms do not leverage browser, do not leverage collaboration, do not leverage cross-device support very easily. That is what eventually we want to get to. However, being said that, it's a very difficult tech problem to bring all of this on a browser and make it cross-device compatible across. So it's a very, very interesting, deep technology problem, but eventually that is where we want to get to. At this point of time, in steps, we are covering different segments already at this point of time. If you're creating a social media video, if you're creating a video ad, if you're creating a promo video, InVideo would be a better solution than the other legacy platforms to actually create and quickly get done with. And eventually we'll cover all forms of video creation, depending how the technology that we are building advances.
All right. You've raised $15 million. Take me through the fund allocation plans, Sanket.
It's a tough problem. Look, I don't think this problem can be solved without the best of the best engineers. So a lot of money is going to go in product development. These companies are built over a period of time and are then valued massively. Some examples are Figma, Canva, et cetera. But technology is the largest moat in this business. So that is where we'll be spending most of our money. Besides that, we face several problems like people don't understand support because it's in English. People are not able to pay in countries like Brazil or Argentina or Russia. So building out support for those places is important because, look, we have users from 150 plus countries, and it gets chaotic at that scale when you're trying to make sure that everything works for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, Sanket, I also noticed that you did start a hiring campaign with content creator and stand-up artist Rahul Subramaniam on LinkedIn. So expanding your tech team, would that be on the top of your list?
I've been making cold calls since last 4 days. I've been calling candidates. I think at times they're surprised that they're getting a call like that. But I have been calling candidates. It's P0. It's absolute P0. Harsh and I are spending most of our time just hiring candidates. And look, having an idea that is not very standard is probably the best way to actually have a moonshot. And that was our attempt to a moonshot that, hey, if we have to fill 15 positions in 3 months, can we do it in 15 days? And speed is also a competitive advantage for startups. I mean, that's what we are here for.
So, take me through your revenue model, how you monetizing, is it customized for each client? How does the whole model work?
It used to be. We used to charge you folks a lot. Now we don't. But,
good to hear
that. So look, our first step, we believe that it's a winner takes most market. We believe that the first step is to make video creation more accessible to the world, to make sure that folks are able to create videos easily without any pain points.
Okay.
However, we also embrace a subscription model where subscription plan starts from $10 a month. But our goal is that for the most part, you should not have to buy something unless you're a power user. That's our current strategy. Now, a company changes their strategy at different time because there's a lot of context, but that is our current strategy and that is what it will be for the next couple of years.
All right, good to hear that. We'll keep a watch on this venture of yours and hope to get you back on the show. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Startup Street. Thank you so much, Sanket, for joining us today. Stay tuned. More news and updates coming up on the other side.